Good morning, Metalheads here now. Welcome to a new episode of the Metal Meltdown, and today we're looking at this brand new album, Carnivore, from Body Count, featuring the one and only, the OG original gangsta himself, Ice-T. I think it's still very safe to say that most people who know Ice-T would know Ice-T for his work as a hip-hop innovator and even pioneer through records like the aforementioned OG Original Gangster, Power, Freedom of Speech. So you should, frankly. These are great records, very important records. I think it's safe to say that the landscape of hip-hop is severely different without a gentleman like Ice-T and these influential works. But as time has gone on, as the genres have changed, Ice-T has actually shown less and less interest in the world of hip-hop and has progressively become more and more fascinated with the worlds of hard rock and heavy metal. Beginning subtly by slowly implementing rock flourishes and electric guitars into his hip-hop records, expanding on that eventually with the full-on metal track Body Count, and that eventually evolving into the project we now know today as Body Count, which Ice-T has pretty much made his main priority, musically speaking, within the last decade. A project that in turn, I think, has shown us a consistently more confident and invigorated Ice-T than what we saw on his solo hip-hop albums. Now again, that's not to knock their influence, that's not to knock their importance, their quality for that matter, but Body Count Ice-T is a whole different breed of pissed off and nasty compared to hip-hop Ice-T. Like, this Ice-T feels untethered, free from the restrictions of a genre that he's openly admitted he doesn't really feel very connected to anymore. This Ice-T doesn't mince words, and he also doesn't care what is typically expected of a heavy metal record. If he wants to do a bunch of intros and skits throughout an album, he will. If he wants to do something weird and jokey like KKK Bitch, and then follow it with something very provocative and heavy like Cop Killer, he will. If he wants to do a Slayer cover, if he wants to do a Suicidal Tendencies cover, if he wants to do a Jay-Z cover, he will. If he wants to have Max Cavalera and Dave Mustaine and Jamie Josta and Amy fucking Lee on the record, he will. Because he wants to. And for these reasons, a Body Count record is always very, very exciting. And this record in particular, if I may say right off the bat, strikes me as perhaps being his most ambitious, his most urgent, and his most volatile, at the very least since the band's debut album. Not a perfect record, mind you. A lot of the issues that have existed in previous Body Count records remain intact here, and at this point it's arguably a little annoying that they've never been addressed, but all things considered, one can't really knock Ice-T for his ambition, his drive, and his anger, and one can't also deny that on a very basic level, Body Count is just plain fun. Like, even in Carnivore's dumbest moments, it's really hard not to be wrapped up in Ice-T's world. His energy, his attitude, his violence, it's literally infectious. He has this weird, forceful charisma as if he's some kind of angry salesman or Hollywood agent. He can literally sell anything he says, even if he has to force you to buy it. Which he doesn't usually need to do anyway, as his attitude is complemented quite nicely by his most abrasive and honest lyrics in a long, long time, detailing his woes with social media, gang violence, racism, xenophobia, neo-Nazis, Donald Trump, often using these woes to try and communicate and encourage some kind of retaliatory action. Take, for instance, the track Point the Finger, featuring Riley Gale of Power Trip, in which Ice-T, with Riley's help, directs his anger at American police forces and American federal institutions that get away with murdering innocent young black men. Or on the track Bum Rush, where Ice-T literally asks you to organize your friends and your peers and to attack hypocritical, hateful politicians. With lyrics like white on black, black on white, Muslim hatred, it's all hype, spread the terror, fear of war, billions spent on a fucking wall, it's all twisted, the game is bent, still no clean water in Flint, going on in the chorus, you can't stop the bum rush. Continuing, feel the power as we come, as we all move as one, if the street gangs could unite, cops gonna get real polite. Another track that catches my eye as far as the lyrical tone and urgency is concerned would be When I'm Gone, a very surprising vocal duet with Amy Lee of Evanescence. A very odd, weird, unpredictable collaboration to be sure, but perhaps more importantly in context of the album, it is an oddly emotional highlight of the album, as Ice-T, moved by the young death of Nipply Hussle, encourages you to simply hold those you love close and to tell them that you care and that you're there for them. It's not a great track, if we're being entirely honest. I would even argue that the musical planets of Evanescence and Body Count are just way too different to mesh properly into one, but I still appreciate the drive, I still appreciate the ambition, I still appreciate the emotional urgency of this track, and I also appreciate that going forward into the rest of the album, it's not the only moment of genuine, if surprising, diversity. Take for instance tracks like No Remorse and Carnivore, which see Body Count indulging into the world of modern deathcore, with the latter track in particular standing out as sonically being one of the band's heaviest songs ever. Or even the nods to Ice-T's hip-hop legacy via new versions of some of his old tracks, 6 in the Morning and Colors, the latter of which is another one of my favorites on the record, a particularly raucous number, featuring a fantastic guest spot from Dave Lombardo. And speaking of covers, there's even a Lemmy Kilmister tribute in the form of an Ace of Spades cover, which is a fun and even solemn and sweet moment on the record. Ultimately, though, as much as I enjoy the music, as much as I enjoy the drive, the ambition, the urgency, and the fire of this record, it still suffers from the same thing that has plagued, frankly, every single Body Count record since the band's literal inception, and it's the very simple fact that Ice-T, at least as far as hard rock and heavy metal is concerned, is a very hit-and-miss songwriter. He is absolutely capable of writing some super energetic, poignant tracks like Bum Rush, Carnivore, Point the Trigger, but he's also just as capable of writing something really unnecessary, bloated, and just plain stupid. The aforementioned When I'm Gone stands out as a very obvious example. I appreciate the emotional urgency of that track, but ultimately the melodramatic gothic metal of Evanescence does not fuse very well with the brash rap crossover thrash of Body Count. Maybe a super flexible avant-garde band like Diablo Swing Orchestra could pull that off, but not Ice-T. Another great example, the track Another Level, featuring Jamie Josta. This just feels like a really childish, juvenile track where Ice-T brags about how successful he is, and it doesn't matter what anyone says, fuck the haters, I'm cool, you suck. I don't know, it sounds like the kind of thing that like a teenage Eminem would write if he was challenged to write a metal song. Now granted, if I have to pick between juvenile melodrama and the absolute lunacy of tracks like Evil Dick and KKK Bitch, I'll probably pick the former over the latter, but it still brings everything down in context of this album. As do many of the intros littered across this thing, which at this point only exist on a Body Count record to justify the existence of Body Count. But hey, these are problems that arguably come with the territory of Body Count at this point. And all in all, I would say that this is probably Body Count's most refined record, their best balanced record, and their most enjoyable record. I would say that I remember more from this now than I do from any of the last Body Count records, even despite lacking a hyper-provocative cut like Bitch in the Pit, Black Hoodie, or No Lives Matter. A particularly impressive feat for a band that, let's be honest, existed for many years off of creating hyper-provocative songs. With all this in mind, I would give this a semi-enthusiastic 3 out of 5. I think longtime Body fans will be super happy with the final product here. You know, it delivers on everything they want and makes enough minor changes and improvements that it still feels pretty fresh, it still feels pretty different compared to the other records. I think modern fans of metal unfamiliar with Body Count will get a lot out of this as well, particularly if you're into the modern hardcore and deathcore scene, which Body Count definitely taps into, especially aesthetically. And honestly, if you're just looking for something kind of simple, dumb, and straightforward to turn your brain off to and pass the time with, you really can't go wrong with this. There are some really fun tunes on here, and as noted before, there is something just objectively really entertaining about Ice-T fronting a metal band. So 3 to 5, not the prettiest record in the world, but a damn entertaining and even ambitious one, to the point where I'm legitimately very excited to see where Body Count continue to expand and grow in the future. Definitely look this up if you're looking for something a little funky to spice up the regular metal playlist. And that is it for the Metal Meltdown. I'm not an expert, nor do I claim to be, so what do you think? Do you like this record? Do you not like this record? And what do you want to hear from me next? Thank you for watching. Make sure you press subscribe so you get updates on the Metal Meltdown fucking immediately. And you have yourself a fantastic fucking day.